You're live.
Uh-huh. Okay. Go
Okay, we're live now.
ahead. Believe. Oh,
Okay. Hi, we are George and Nancy Callister. And last week you heard a little more. No, we're not live yet.
oh. Now, does our whole picture show? Does our whole face show?
I think so.
Okay. How do you know?
Okay, I don't know if we're live here or not. But anyways, we are George and Nancy Callister. And last week you had the opportunity to hear a little more about me as I was interviewed by Pastor Terry. And today Nancy is here, and she is going to be giving a little bit about. You'll be learning a little more about her. So I'm going to give her an opportunity to talk. You can get an opportunity to get to know her a little bit better. So Nancy, tell us a little bit about where you grew up, a little bit about your family and all of that.
I grew up in a small town, Terry Hill, in the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And there was only about 1,000 people there. But it was a wonderful place to grow up. You practically knew everyone who was in town. And, excuse me, went to an elementary school there and then on to high school in the bigger town of New Holland. And it was just a great place to grow up. I was very blessed. And I'm the youngest of 4 girls. My mom and dad were wonderful people, and there's 10 years between my oldest sister and me, with 2 in the middle. And so that's about it as far as my background, a little bit.
All right. We met at Lancaster Bible College. So tell us just a little bit about your church history, how you came to the Lord, and sort of your introduction to missions.
I grew up I went to church in town at the Methodist Church. When I was little, it was Evangelical United Brethren, and then they merged with the Methodist. So that's where I grew up. I was in Sunday school every week, part of the youth group. And but I can honestly say I learned all the Bible stories, but I don't remember actually hearing the plan of salvation, how Jesus came and died and rose again for my sins, until I was 15. And at that time, the United Methodist had a thing going within the conference that was called Lay Witness Mission. And people who were born again within the Methodist Church would get together as groups, teens as well as adults, and they would have a conference at a local Methodist church for a weekend. And it was there at the age of 15 on a Saturday night, and I can take you right to the spot that I was, where I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. And so, but growing up in the Methodist Church, the only thing I knew about missions was there was an older lady, Miss Ruth, never married, and she was a missionary at Redbird Mission in Kentucky. And she was the only thing I knew as far as missions. And so the idea of missions just never kind of was something that I thought about, because I had every intention of being married, and Miss Ruth never got married, and so I thought that was the norm for a missionary. And then, of course, I also knew of the missionaries that you heard about that were like in Africa, and you always pictured them with a pith helmet and a spear, and I had no interest in that until I met a young man, and then things kind of changed.
So you're going to tell us about how we met And your first experience with a missionary's kid?
I went to Lancaster Bible College in the fall of 1976. Don't do the math. And so I was there, and I had every intention of going the 4 years and getting a. At that time, Lancaster was giving. You graduated with of
In Bible.
a bachelor's degree in Bible, and then you minored in different things like Christian education or music, and I was minoring in music. And so, I was involved in a lot of the different musical groups at school, at college. And then come January, oh, it might have been January or February, every now and then the guys would have intramural pickup games of basketball. And so I was in the gym with a friend of mine just watching the guys play. And I kind of picked up on this one young man who was on the court. And what really caught my eye was he was kind of limping off the court because he had hurt his ankle. And so, it piqued my interest. And then I found out from a friend of mine that he was an older student, meaning that he was 21. And at Lancaster, for students who were under 21, we had regular study hours in the dorm or in the library every night. Well, a friend of mine was doing her work study at the snack shack in the student union, and I found out that George actually studied every night in the student union. So I talked to Jill and I said, "Do you need help in the snack shack?" And she said, "Yeah." So I would go to the snack shack for nothing and work there, and usually mid-shift, this young man would come over to the counter and we would start talking, and that's where it all began. And I did learn about the fact that he grew up in Africa and he was a missionary and was looking towards missions. And but then it was during I believe that spring that we had a missions conference at school, at college, and I have no idea who the speaker was. I have no idea what his Bible text was. But the thing that hit me was we have to be planning to go we need to be willing to go and not planning to stay. And I got to realizing that God may be calling me to something that I had no idea about, but yet I felt the need to be open to whatever the Lord was calling us to.
And we graduated then from Lancaster Bible College and prepared to go to the mission field. We were originally going to go to Australia, and then the Lord redirected us, and we were out in the Pacific Islands. We were on the island of Guam with a church planting ministry for about a year, and then on the island of Kashrai, a little atoll out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And then the Lord brought us back to the United States through some circumstances with family health and that kind of thing. And we spent 20 years in church planting here in the United States. I wanted to, as you get to know Nancy a little bit better, kind of get a wife's perspective from being the wife of a missionary and a pastor, and maybe a little bit of perspective on what it's like to raise a family in the environment of missions and a church and a mission church planting situation.
When we initially went overseas to Guam, we had one child, Bill, our oldest, and he was 4 at the time when we left. Now this was of course his first time on an airplane, and it was my first time on an airplane, and we went from New York City to Guam with just a stop in Los Angeles and Hawaii, and there was about an hour and a half layover at both places. So that was pretty traumatic for me. But we went and we were ministering initially until we went out to the small island of Kashrai, and we were ministering to military that were on because that's the church that we were working with that was trying to reach the military that were there. And we pretty much had an open door policy in our home. And because some of these young men and women just needed a place to get away to that wasn't the barracks and it wasn't the base. And so I would just make sure that there was always snacks of some kind because these young men and women were always hungry. And it just was a wonderful opportunity to open our doors and to just share the gospel through word and deed to these young men and women. And so that was an exciting time for us. And then uh, the mission asked us to go to the small island of Kashrai, which was 42 square miles. And at the time, Disney World was bigger than 42 square miles, so it was a very small island. But we went there. Some of the people did speak English, but we were starting to learn the language. Um, our son Bill, Billy, as he was known, was the only little white guy on the island. And if we weren't sure where he was, we would just go outside and say, "Have you seen Billy?" And we would hear all around people saying, "Billy, Billy." And soon enough, this little guy would come running because he was out playing with his friends. But we were there I was there for maybe 6, 7 months.
Yeah.
And I was expecting our second child, and they had told us you really can't have the baby here because of the lack of medical facilities. So I was going to go back to Guam and stay with some friends from the church. And then my aunt and uncle contacted us and said that they would love to pay for my way to come home to have the baby. And so that's what we did. So Bill and I flew home, and it was when I was in labor with uh, our second child that Bill had what turned out to be a grand mal seizure. And so it was probably more traumatic for my mom than it was for me because mom was going between me in labor and Bill in the emergency room where my dad had brought him. But our daughter Carly was born that evening, and they did send Bill home, not sure what he had, but it was 11 days later he had another seizure and was hospitalized and diagnosed with epilepsy. But we just saw just the Lord's perfect timing in that whole thing, because had this happened when we were out in Kashrai, only the Lord knows what would have happened. So George eventually made his way home, and then it was time to ask the Lord, seek the Lord, and find out what the next thing is and that He wants us to do. And He led us into U.S. church planting, which was just a neat opportunity again to use some of the gifts that the Lord gave us and equipped us with. One of the things I love to do is feed people and to have people in to share with them. And so we went into U.S. church planting, and it was just, our whole family was involved. And when you're a missionary church planter, especially at first when you have so few people in the church, the pastor, of course, is busy with all kinds of things, but I was busy kind of filling in wherever needed. And I would find myself on a Sunday morning at the piano playing one-handed because I don't play piano, so that the congregation can sing. And as soon as that part was over, I'd head back to the foyer where we had curtained off an area for the nursery. And so you just do what you're supposed to do, and thank the Lord for all that He's equipped us with to handle.
Yeah, I think that, going into missions, I grew up on the foreign field, so I thought the Lord would keep us on the foreign field. We learned the language in Kashrai. I was basically functional in the language. I started teaching a Bible study with a group of young men, and we thought our career was going to be in foreign missions. And it was a bit of a gear change to come back to the States and even think about being involved in church planting in the U.S. But as we saw the need, the Lord really burdened us for areas where there was a need for a good gospel preaching church, and we spent 20 years doing that. And that has been a blessing. I believe that God leads you to do whatever it is He wants you to do, given the gifts and abilities you have. And you look at the options God has, you seeking God's will. I think I talked about this a little bit last week. When you're seeking God's will, you look at the gifts and abilities that God has given you, and then you move in the place where God opens the doors where you can be the most effective in using those gifts and abilities. So that's a little bit about our ministry. Any further insight into being a pastor's wife and advice you might give someone who is in that situation or looking at that possibility?
I guess this is my turn.
That's a question.
I just think the important thing is just to be open and available to whatever the Lord leads you to. Of course, your relationship with your husband, who is the leader of the flock, has to be very real, and don't be fake, and just be open to whatever comes along. Sometimes it's things that you're equipped to do. Sometimes it's like, okay, I'll do this until somebody else who is more able comes along. But I look back, and here's the thing. I was a young girl. I got married at 20, and I had never been anywhere really. And George promised to take me places and show me things, and boy did he, because he took me to halfway around the world to Guam, and then he took me to this little tiny island where I couldn't communicate with a lot of the people. And then he took me to the Adirondack Mountains, where our first church was, then right outside of Philadelphia, and then up to another area in upstate New York. And I'm blessed to have a man that I love so much, and we have a wonderful relationship. And
Amen.
It's just, I wouldn't change a thing. I really wouldn't. And just a little bit about our family. I told you that we had a son and daughter, and our son and daughter are both married. They both got married in the same year, and our daughter is the youngest, and she and Rob they just had their 7th child. And our son Bill and his wife Megan have 5 children. So we have an even dozen at this time of grandchildren. And we are blessed. Now the only problem is we are in Florida and they are in upstate New York. So it's been over a year since we have seen them, and there are 2 new grandchildren that were born in that year that we have yet to meet in person.
Amen. Well, that's a little bit about the ministry. Maybe to get into, we only have a few minutes. And by the way, Pastor Terry will be back tomorrow, so you don't have to put up with me another day. But just a little bit, maybe after we've looked at the ministry and the things that God has called us to do, looking at maybe hobbies. What is it you like to do? What are some hobbies that you would that you're involved in? Pastor Terry asked me that question. I didn't have any real good answers because I really don't have much in the way of hobbies, but maybe speak to that a little bit.
I do enjoy reading, and since the pandemic, I've always read, but I always was a book reader as far as holding it in my hand. And then when the pandemic hit and couldn't go to the library or anything, I have actually gotten really used to enjoying reading my books on my iPad or my phone. So I do a lot of reading. Hobbies, I don't know if you would call shopping a hobby, but I do enjoy shopping. And it's not about the going out and spending a lot of money and buying things. For me, it's the excitement of the hunt for just a wonderful deal. And it's got to the point where my best friend, she started asking me to do shopping for them, and they entrusted me with their own credit card so that I didn't have to always be getting money back from them. But I just enjoy doing that. So if any of you have any needs, let me know.
There you go, personal shopping. This has been good. Our time is basically up. As I said, Pastor Terry will be back tomorrow. And this has been a good opportunity, I think, for you to get to know us a little bit better, get to know Nancy a little bit better. We have been coming to First Baptist Church of Wellington now for several months, and we really love it here. It has been a real blessing. It has been a tremendous encouragement to us to be a part of this ministry. We thank you for those of you that have stayed on for the entire time. Thank you. And we will see some of you in church. We'd like to see all of you in church in the very near future. Thank you so much. God bless.